Hi, I'm Randy. This is Life Today TV. I have Kelly Shackelford, who is the CEO and president of the Liberty Institute, fighting for issues that Christians care about, probably you care about. And we're going to talk about a hot one because things could change real quick with the Supreme Court making a decision related to gay marriage. Glad you're here. Thanks for being here.
Oh, happy to be here.
So I think the term you used earlier was a tsunami is coming.
Most likely. I mean, nobody knows what the Supreme Court's going to do, but late June, everybody's expecting an opinion down on the same-sex marriage case. And our brief that we filed was specifically on the religious liberty implications. And if you look in other countries that have done this, the carnage to the First Amendment, to free speech, to religious freedom is everywhere they've done this, that's followed. And so we were trying to warn the court that, look, you have to look at what you're doing. If you create this new right, this new constitutional right to same-sex marriage, well, then what happens to this other constitutional right of free speech? What happens to this constitutional right of religious freedom? Are they now subservient to this? I mean, it creates really a constitutional crisis, and it sort of triggers all these different things that began to happen. Every federal agency you can imagine, things get triggered, and it starts a battle that ends up being in the courts. And so if that does happen, if they create this new right in late June, it's just going to be the beginning of really a tsunami of legal battles and different things to define what's happened to religious freedom and a lot of other issues around that as well.
So specifically, what are you thinking? Are we going to lose our nonprofit status around here, our tax-exempt status, which a lot of churches are actually foregoing that so that they don't get encumbered by?
Well, I mean, it's interesting you asked that question. During the oral argument, one of the questions by the justices to the Solicitor General of the United States, who's arguing on behalf of our government, was, wait, when we think back, there was this old case, this Bob Jones University case, where Bob Jones University at the time was not allowing interracial dating. And they said, well, the IRS said, well, that's discrimination, and if you're engaging in discrimination, you lose your tax-exempt status. So Justice Alito in the question said, so if this is now a constitutional right, and you disagree with it, you're engaging in discrimination, wouldn't you have to lose your tax-exempt status? And I mean, those of us who are up there all the time know that if you're arguing a case like this, a huge case, you don't want to push any further than you have to go. So everybody expected the Solicitor General to say, oh no, we're not going after everybody's tax-exempt status. To everyone's shock, his answer was, that will be an issue. So
hinting that that's coming.
Saying that, yeah, pretty much admitting to the court that if you do what we're asking you to do and create this new constitutional right, we're going to have to look at all the nonprofits, whether they're a Christian school. Of course, there's no reason why that same approach wouldn't apply to every church, right, every ministry. It would open all of that up. And that's just one area.
That's just one thing. A lot of people say that's not that big a deal. What would that do to churches and Christian schools?
Well, I think Al Mohler wrote a column not too long ago that predicted, he saw the transcript of the oral argument. He said that probably half the churches would close.
Really?
Certainly half the Christian ministries would, because they don't have the financial wherewithal to handle the adjustment that would occur. That all of a sudden there's no tax deductions for gifts, everybody's salaries and everything else now, there's taxes on all these things. There's a huge burden that if you're not a large ministry or have a lot of resources, that the overhead would drown you. And so it would literally shut down a lot of Christian ministries and churches.
Beyond that, do you really think, is it just a scare tactic, or is it a real situation that people could go to jail for speaking out against homosexuality or gay marriage?
I mean, it's already been attempted in the United States. So I mean, we're already moving in where people are trying to accomplish that. There's been.
Do you have specific cases you worked on?
In Philadelphia, there were some people who were out sharing the gospel. They specifically went to the quote Outfest, which is a homosexual, event to witness and to try to bring people to the Lord. They were charged with what is essentially a hate crime of their speech out there, and it was a criminal action against them. They could have gotten up to 99 years in prison under these laws. Now, they got defense, criminal defense, and they were able to win, and get things dismissed. But I mean, that's an incredible chilling on speech, and that's real reminiscent to what we've seen in other countries. You know, you look at Sweden, where you had a pastor sentenced to jail because of preaching out of the Bible on homosexuality. So there are people that, you know, it used to be all about tolerance, but somehow the tolerance doesn't work for people who disagree on the issue, and people who come from a sincerely held religious belief and biblical doctrine. The attempt by some of these folks on the other side is, you will agree with us or we will punish you. Right. And we're seeing that in a lot of ways right now. We're seeing it with these bakers and florists. And I mean, there's plenty of bakers and florists to do weddings that probably don't have any religious objection to participating in, you know, a same-sex marriage ceremony or whatever. But they're specifically seeking out these folks that do have a religious conscious objection. And so we're seeing that in a lot of different ways. I could tell you about lawsuit after lawsuit in different areas, in employment and everything else, where the same type of thing is being done. The idea of letting people respectfully disagree is really not being allowed.
Why, okay, let me ask you, why do you think that has changed? Because it used to be, hey, quit condemning us, quit prosecuting us, just leave us alone. It's kind of a libertarian view of, hey, just let us do what we want to do and leave us alone. And I kind of get that, right?
Yeah.
It's flipped to where now we're not going to let you do what you want to do. We're going to cause problems for you. We're going to shut your business down. You know, we're going to shut your church down. We're going to shut you up. Why? How has it become so aggressive? Because, I mean, I can be a Christian and disagree with somebody on the issue. Two guys go live together down the street from me. I don't care. Right. They can do whatever they want. I don't, you know, I care for their souls. But as far as, you know, legally or whatever, I'm not going to go after them. I'm just going to leave them alone. Why can't they just leave us alone?
Well, that's the way it should be. That's the way America, I mean, this is sort of what our brief focused on in the Supreme Court on this marriage case, on the right of the First Amendment to dissent. I mean, that nothing is more American than the right to disagree with the government. The government is now, let's say the government now takes a position on what it thinks marriage is. Well, Americans who disagree, there's nothing more American than saying, okay, the government can believe that, but we're going to follow our faith in what we believe and what we know to be true. That, I mean, that's why America was founded. And that's what the attack is here. Now, you ask why or how did this happen? I mean, there are some, if you look at Andrew Sullivan, who's a very well-known, you know, gay rights advocate, that says this is too far, this pushing.
Yeah, he has.
But most are not. And it's sort of this strategy of ask for tolerance until you get power, and then when you get power, give no tolerance. Right. So it's a real hypocrisy. It's sort of you should be tolerant, and we're against bullying. And then as soon as any power is in your hands, you engage in bullying and intolerance. But fortunately, the laws in this country are for tolerance, are for non-bullying, especially by the government. And so this is the battle that's upon us. And if the Supreme Court does what is expected, because there's 4 conservatives, 4 liberals, and then Justice Kennedy, who's been the one who's written all of the LGBT decisions, sort of finding new rights in those arenas. He's the swing vote, so he's suspected to go with the 4 liberals. If so, it's going to trigger all this stuff. I mean, there are a lot of federal laws that all of a sudden, when you change this as a federal law, that this is now the definition of marriage, it'll affect every ministry in this country in ways they're not even thinking about. I mean, you might think, well, no, we do a homeless shelter. How's it going to affect us? Well, what happens when the new family says they want to stay the night and you have a policy for families? Well, we have a biblical policy for families. Well, now you're discriminating if you have a biblical policy for families. And what if you're in foster care? What if you place kids for adoption? Every ministry, every church, we had a church call us recently and said, we're just a mission agency. And all of a sudden we got called from a gay church that wanted to be a part of our association. And we never even considered such a thing. And so now they could get sued because they're—
For saying no.
Yeah, for saying you can't be a part. So it's every area of life and every federal department, from housing and urban development to all of our employment laws to the Department of Labor we could give you a list, and it's going to affect all of society in ways that people aren't thinking about. And we're not going to know the result of that and how much freedom is left until we're through those battles.
Best case scenario on the decision. What's the best we can hope for?
The best that could happen on the decision in this aspect is to say we're going to let the states decide this, that this is not an issue that's in the Constitution.
By judge or by popular vote?
Well, it should be by the democratic process.
Because we've seen that's been shot down just about every time.
But when they shoot it down, they're really shooting it down through federal constitutional rights. Okay. So if the court were to say, you know, we're going to let this play out, which really, even if you wanted the new gay marriage approach, do you do what Roe v. Wade, where you push too soon and you create a lot of backlash, and then 30 or 40 years later, maybe you've lost the issue and now more people are pro-life than pro-choice? Or do you let it play out? Do you think you can win the hearts and minds of people, which we'll see what Justice Kennedy says, but that would be the only hope of things not moving very fast. But they would still be moving, and it would be up to every state. It wouldn't be judges making the decision. It would be the people. And now what's fascinating is, if you go back, I think we've had 38 states who have voted on this. They passed constitutional amendments, and millions and millions and millions said, we want marriage to be a man and a woman. Right. But things are, maybe it's a few years later, and who knows, but at least you could have the marketplace of ideas. Right. You could talk about what is the impact of this going to be? How does this impact society and government? They could get into the public policy things. Again, whether you're a Christian or not, what marriage is affects a lot of things. And the reason God made it a man and a woman is because He knows the blessing that comes from that you get children. You provide every child with a mom and a dad, a male and a female role model. I mean, there's all these incredible things that, you know, biblical marriage provides.
Careful, you're discriminating.
and that's what we would be talking about, is that debate would go on in every state, and you'd see what happens through that process. Most people think that's probably not going to happen. Probably 80% chance that the court is going to take this into their own hands, which I think would be, you know, a mistake, because it's not in the Constitution. This really is something that's left to the people, and I think it would be a lot healthier. But if that does happen, it's going to trigger a lot of religious liberty implications for groups all around the country.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll be on the front lines of violating it and not caring what the consequences are, frankly. You know? And
I think that's going to be the test, really, of the church and of people of faith, is sort of a Joshua 1 time, you know, where God had to tell the Israelites, be strong and courageous. Mm-hmm. You know, now they ended up winning. They got to the promised land at the end of that, but they needed to be told, be strong and courageous. And I think it's going to be a testing time for people in this country. Are they willing to pay a cost or a price for standing on what is true and saying, you know what, whatever the consequences are, I'm going to be faithful?
Absolutely. Now, you got a lot of people worried, and they're going to want to follow this case and follow your reaction to it, and they may need some help. How can they reach out to you?
The best way is just libertyinstitute.org. That's our website, libertyinstitute.org. And I would tell, you know, if they have a church or a religious organization, there's even something they can do between now and the decision, in addition to praying. And that is on our website. It'll say, are you protected? They can click on it. They can even look at their own legal documents for their church, for their ministry, and it'll tell you which legal documents to look at, because there's certain things they need to be very clear about if they, as an organization, believe those things, and they need to be in their documents before it's too late and they become under attack. So that's all available at libertyinstitute.org as well.
Good. Any other action items the individuals might want to engage in? Petitions? Are you guys doing things like that?
I'd say the key thing is, I would really encourage them to make sure and go on the website and sign up to get the weekly emails. Because when they get an email, number one, it will keep them informed as to what's really happening, whether the media is talking about it or not. It'll cause them to think about prayer. It'll give them an opportunity to share that with other people who need to know, because I think there's a lot more power when people are together and they know the information and they're praying and they're then activated to do things and to make a difference. But without the information and without people praying, there's really not much hope. So I really encourage people, make sure they get the emails and the information so that they're informed and that they can inform others.
Very good. Check it out. Check out libertyinstitute.org. And you will be able to see more from Kelly Shackelford on Life Today. You will be able to see that at lifetoday.org. Thanks for sitting down with us.
I'm happy to do it.